Well, whether you were raising kids in the 1990s or have kids in your life now, you may be familiar with the TV work of tonight's guest. Angela Santomero is the creator of 7 award-winning hit shows for TV, for PBS, Nickelodeon, Netflix, and more, including Blue's Clues and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, the spinoff of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. A protege of Fred Rogers, she has devoted her life to empowering children and parents with her joyful educational approach. Her new book, for adults, it's called Life Clues, Unlocking the Lessons to an Exceptional Life. Welcome to the Busted Halo Show, Angela Santomero.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Of course, great to have you. I bet there's a lot of people listening right now who are like pulling the car off the side of the road. Blues Clues? What? How was it you came to work on that? A huge hit show.
Oh, thank you. I have a child development background, and so I was at Nickelodeon, and they were looking for a game show,
Great.
and I was in the room where it happens, right? And so I was able to kind of pitch a kindergarten readiness game show that would help kids learn, and it just grew from there with amazing partners and designers and animators, and it was an amazing experience, I have to say. I love it.
Those are fun, creative places to be. Long before you were at what was called at the time MTV Networks, I worked for MTV. Nickelodeon was a part of that with Viacom, and I remember when they created Remote Control. Remember that game show where the people they sat
Yep.
in the chairs and they watched like TV stuff. Yeah, I mean I remember auditions for that. So it's a very exciting time to be a part of that. But then obviously a lot of ideas happen. A lot of things get pitched, and some even things get funded. But to have such a great hit, what do you think it was about that show? I mean, there's something. Some people have shared with me that they think it was one of those few that really allowed, like Mr. Rogers did, but allowed the children themselves to actually like kind of participate by responding, by leaving a chance for them to respond.
Exactly. So it was the pause, right? So Steve,
The
who was
pause.
our original host, would literally lean in. And we used to say that the story couldn't continue unless you, as the home viewer, would answer. And it was the first time for, an entire half an hour that kids were asked to participate throughout the whole thing. And parents were calling us. This is before email, before like internet, whatever, and would call us and be like, why is my kid screaming from the other room? But they're screaming about matching and patterning and sorting and, all the naming all the planets in the solar system. So they were excited about us. And I do think that was a big part of our success.
I think just from someone who wears a uniform every day, I just want to know: was it your idea with the striped shirt? Was that you?
Well, so wearing the same thing every day, yes, repetition's the
Yes.
key to learning. But my co-creator inspired the shirt from fruit stripe gum. That is something
Really?
not everybody will remember,
Oh,
but it
I
had
do.
these beautiful tone on tone stripes.
yeah.
And so that was inspired by that.
Fruit stripe gum, pretty cool. Angela Santomero is our guest here on the Busted Halo Show. She's created many award-winning hit TV shows such as Blue's Clues and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. I've heard part of your story, and you shared with us in the book that growing up, you would watch Mr. Rogers and think to yourself, "Boy, I'd love to do that someday," and you did get to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time I wasn't sure that that's what I wanted to do, but
Yeah,
at the
right.
I remember being inspired, like literally talking to Mr. Rogers, and he was so respectful and he knew I was smart and I really felt this connection. And when my little brother was born, I'm 14 years older, he was like interacting with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and I was like, okay, if he could get up and start kicking at the screen, we could do something with the whole Mr. Rogers plus kindergarten readiness. And so, you know what I mean? Thinking skills.
Right.
So it kind of all started to fizzle and buzz, from then.
And you got to know and work with Fred Rogers?
Oh yeah, I'm such a super fan that when we first premiered with Blue's Clues, I would say all the time, like Fred was the first who would talk to the camera and really respect the audience. Fred was the first. Our pacing was so, intentional. And there were a lot of academic articles that were written about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and its effect on kids. And so because of that, we got to know each other and started
Oh,
to just like talk about child development and our responsibility in media. And he said he didn't love much of what was on TV for kids, but he really liked Blue's Clues, so that was huge for me.
Well, sure. And does that play into Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood? Because maybe some people would be very familiar with Blue's Clues, but if their kids are older, they may not be tuning in to things like that. I know somebody had told me about it. I don't have kids, obviously. But Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, how did that come about?
So yes, so the idea that after Fred died, I was constantly asked on press, like, just to talk about him. And then his team reached out and said, he didn't like it very much, but he really respected what you did. Would you do anything to promote his legacy? And I was like, give me a minute. I will think about yes, yes, but give me a
Let me
minute.
say yes.
Yes, yes. And I remember saying, like, here's what I don't want to do though. I'm not your person if you want to hire a new Mr. Rogers, because you're not going to
Right,
find a new Fred Rogers, right? So
right.
he was somebody that was born into this. And so I said I would animate the world. And as a preschooler loving the show, the idea that the characters from the neighborhood of make believe would all grow up and they'd all have preschoolers of their own. And
Wow.
Daniel Tiger has the little red sweater and the sneakers, and he has that energy that Fred had, and leans in to teach the socio-emotional skills that Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood also taught.
Angela Santomero is our guest here on the Busted Halo Show. Just staying with that a minute. We'll talk about your life clues for the rest of us adults in a moment. But I mean, you've obviously got a lot of training in this. Are there things that we, as kind of society or world, miss about the standard, like, let's just say how we raise kids? And again, this is a question that's coming from a celibate, so I don't have any personal experience with this. But I mean, you're talking a lot about some things that maybe we just assume, oh, put on the TV and that'll entertain them for a while. But there's important formative things that happen in those years, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was what brought me to the preschool years, right? Because they're such sponges. They're constantly absorbing information, and what we model and what they see is what they do, right? And so the idea of I come from a family of teachers, and the idea of putting the best curriculum on television for millions of kids, if we can promote education and fun and play and interesting information, and that they could be better off for watching. So that's what I would tell my team. It's like, I want to make sure that this 30 minutes that kids are watching, it's better than going outside and playing, which is a high bar, but I know how influential media is, and I know how we can use it for good. And so we even had, like, not to geek out, but I even had longitudinal studies done to prove that kids who watched Blue's Clues were statistically significantly smarter than kids who didn't watch. Same for
Wow.
Daniel Tiger on labeling feelings and emotions and being able to problem solve, and same for Super Why, which was my second show that promotes reading. And so that one was funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and so we proved also that kids were able to learn the what the National Reading Panel deems critical for reading success, learning to read through Super Y.
Now, I'm dying to know if your family of teachers kind of at some point, maybe they've come around, but at some point look down their nose, oh, she does television. Come on, she should be teaching. Keep them in the books.
Of course. And also, yes. And I do
Yes.
so much formative research, right? So we go into schools, and teachers are the ones who are like, ugh. And when they say they like it, I'm like, so it's like the Simon Cowell of, it's like if
Right.
they say they like it, I'm so happy.
You'll go into Hollywood. Well, Angela
Exactly.
Santomero is our guest on the Busted Halo Show. You may know her from Blue's Clues and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. She's got a brand new book called Life Clues, Unlocking the Lessons to an Exceptional Life. All right, so I wanted to get to the book, but before we let you go, Angela, because we have you here, well, our producer has a 3-year-old toddler and is about to, in about 2 weeks, give birth to a child. So we're going to get some advice before you leave for our producer. But I really was very intrigued by your book that you now have written for adults. First of all, was that kind of like always in the plan? Was it a stretch? Because a lot of these are it's my takeaway would be, boy, there's stuff that we presume there's just sort of elementary that kids should learn, but when we grow up, we kind of don't focus on that stuff. And you're bringing us back around saying, no, we should have play in our life. We should use our minds and challenge ourselves. So, I mean, was it an obvious thing to write a book for adults?
My girls are adults now, and the
Ah,
idea that, there are what you want to give your kids to take them into the world as, new adults. I started to keep a notebook of all the lessons and the things that we would talk about, like around the dinner table, or what we would say to preschoolers, and how it's still important now. And sometimes when you put it in either a musical strategy or a playful little, it kind of takes the heat off of the situation, so you can find a little joy and cut through the stress a little bit. And so that's what I would do. Like, and it's so funny when my little one was 16, I would sing a Daniel Tiger strategy, when she was really mad. I was like, "Oh, if you feel so mad you want to roar, take a deep breath and count of 4." And she'd be like, "Don't Daniel Tiger me, mom."
Don't you
But she's
dare.
definitely exactly. She's definitely come around. The idea that you could remember to take a breath, so that you can kind of problem solve is really important.
Well, and one of your chapters is taking a breath, taking a moment. You talk about playing, never stop playing. It occurs to me the overlap for here on our show, where a lot of people are listening, not only for us to exclusively talk about Catholicism or religion, but Jesus famously said, unless you have the faith of a little child, you can't get into the kingdom of heaven. Sometimes that's so in a sermon or a homily that's hard for us to grasp, hard for me to preach on, because it's like, well, we can't do that. We've got our adult mindset and we have to be anxious and worry about things and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, it seems like what you're inviting us to in your book would be along the lines of that, even though you don't profess it to be a religious or faith-based book. But it seems like it's at least you and Jesus are in the same camp on this.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's the idea that kids will lead us, right? And the fact that they speak the truth, and if they have the ability in the safe space to give their point of view, they're brilliant. And if we wait long enough for them to answer us, there's such interesting things that they say. And so that perspective is something that kind of that can ground you again as an adult. And I think what I'm searching for is realizing that my kids grow up so fast, and realizing, did I really need to stress out about emptying the dishwasher when they were little? It's like, can I pass on these words of wisdom? Like, it doesn't matter anymore, like, really. So the idea of, like, having a little bit more of a playful point of view, and that most problems can be solved. And if you stop to ask a preschooler, a child, a kid, their point of view, it could kind of remind you to stop and smell the roses every once in a while.
Well, you've got 20 clues in your book called Life Clues Unlocking the Lessons to an Exceptional Life. And one of them is create your own neighborhood. Obviously, you're formed by Mr. Rogers and his neighborhood. What would you say is the importance of community? Because, again, I would find that as another overlap with religion, faith-based communities, that certainly if we look back at sociologically, the history of the world, people have probably more successfully lived in community than we do in our modern era, where we're very individualistic and we connect on what we call quote unquote community digitally. But you're talking about really creating a neighborhood.
Yeah, I think it's the key to longer lasting life. And even Malcolm Gladwell talked about it in The Outliers, and the idea that the community, local shops, being having people who are around you that might know that you're there, having that point of view of being missed if you're not around. Like, that is like something that is really important. And then helping in the community, and then getting that back in return. Not that you're looking for that, but that is that beautiful circle of kindness that happens when you're accountable to people around you, and you're able to support and be part of that community.
And is something like that? I mean, the book we're talking about is for adults, but in your great experience of kind of forming children, is there a point where that is so key to kind of not miss? I mean, obviously, it's not like a certain age or no one will ever be community, but there must be some real formative years where that's so important. And again, in our modern world, there's so many forces that mitigate against that, because we can so easily be with a screen at whatever age we are, whether we're 3 or 93, just sitting like at a restaurant or out in Central Park with a screen in front of ourselves and not really connecting with people. Is that important at an early age?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even taking a walk outside, and you never know who you're going to meet and who you're going to see, what you're going to talk about, all of those kinds of things, getting yourself off the screen is important at any age. And I do think that how you model other people in your life, saying hello, asking a question that, you might know something about them, like, all of those things are your preschooler, your little one is noticing what you're doing and how kind you are or not kind. And that's what they're going to model, right? And noticing that kind of beautiful sense of belonging, which is really, like, we all want to be seen, we all want to be heard. And I think that is a big piece of it. When you go through a lot of the clues of finding more joy in your life, it has a lot to, there's an anchor with that feeling of wanting to be seen and heard for everybody
The
around us.
co-creator of Blues Clues and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, Angela Santomero, is our guest here on the Busted Halo Show this evening. Her latest book is called Life Clues: Unlocking the Lessons to an Exceptional Life. I mentioned a couple minutes ago that Krista, our producer, has a almost 3-year-old. She'll be 3 in June, and her baby sister is coming along very soon. Until really only a couple of weeks ago, she was still greeting people and saying goodbye with
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. No, she just loves.
Is that the cutest thing ever?
Yeah, it's up there.
Oh,
I knew we'd welcome you in with Carmen. Her daughter's name is Carmen. But Krista, we were just talking about right before you came on about here she is in this zone. I mean, going from one to more than one. It's a whole different parenting experience. Angela, you've had a couple of kids. Maybe Krista might have a little question for you. Krista?
Well, first, so I mean, I'm your target audience in terms of I was a child during Blues Clues, and I mean, our family still sings the songs from Blues Clues. We still sing the Mail Time song. We still sing the Thinking Chair. And then now I'm a parent watching Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Of course, we watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I'll tear up at various parts of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and it's so different from everything else we're watching of the pacing and the lessons. And I love that you said if you feel so mad you want to roar, because we sing that. All of these things we know. I do have 2 questions, but the first one, what Father Dave said, is that going from 1 to 2 kids, what is something that as parents that we miss or that's important in parenting more than one, or in just parenting even just the one?
well, first of all, I was going to say we have a Baby Margaret episode when Daniel went from 1 to 2, which was almost like historical fiction of literally how it went for me, going from 1 to 2 in terms of including Hope, the oldest one, in everything that we were doing for the new baby, right? And so everything from her crib going to the new baby, but it was her choice. Her helping us name the baby, it was her choice. There was a lot of little things of all of us are including and trying. I remember bringing the new baby home, and she was actually 2 years 7 months, so she was all over her, and I was like, but literally being able to embrace that energy and creating that nurturing environment where they're able to nurture the little one, and bringing them all in was really important. And then also when they were little, after Ella was out of the crib, we put them in a room together in 2 little twin beds, together. And there was this adorable bond that
Wow.
created until they got a little bit older and we moved them apart. But it was, yeah, I don't know. I think that was also part of it, having to live and share in a little space.
That's beautiful. No, and I guess the next question. I'm just gonna steal this from Father Dave. Sorry. That
Steal.
again, so many little lessons, so many wonderful little lessons, and again, we just had I have my Spotify open right now of many ways to say I love you, and you can take a turn and then you get it back, and we just say these all the time. Is there a lesson or some issue you've wanted to tackle that you haven't been able to yet, or because you haven't just found the right wording?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's so interesting because one of the things that we do with our strategies, and I'll answer your question, I promise, but is to make sure there's a why there and how it's going to affect the kid. So the idea of you should share, I don't know why I would want, and the idea of you'll get it and then you'll get it back. It's okay, now my fears are I understand. So when we figured that out of saying I'm sorry, but then how can I help? That was the second piece of it. It's not just a throwaway, I'm sorry. It's now I have to be actively in the solution to the problem. And I think there was, well, it's not quite the answer, but the death episode that we did where Daniel lost a goldfish, which was actually kind of similar to when Fred had an episode like that. It took us a really long time. We had to shelve that one for a while before we came back to figure out how best we wanted to approach that situation, because we don't want to introduce topics that will be stressful to little ones if they haven't been through it. But we also want to be able to be helpful when something does happen, and starting small in that way and having the same strategy that you would use for something bigger as you grow up over time was really important. So it was something we kept coming back to until we got it right. in our opinion, got it right.
I'd say your opinions are doing pretty good considering the success. Angela Santomero is our guest here on the Busted Halo Show. If you have valued the way in which she and others that she's worked with have formed your children, maybe there's something you could use in your adult life. The book is called Life Clues, Unlocking the Lessons to an Exceptional Life. Angela Santomero, thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to meet you all.
Big fans, obviously big fans. So it was great to have you with us. All right, we're going to put a
Thank you.
link on our radio blog. Everybody knows after the show where to go, bustedhalo.com/radio. So you can find where you can pick up from the imprint, the new imprint from Loyola Press. It's called For You to Be Books and Media. And the book is called Life Clues from Angela Santomero. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.